Hello, collectors, fans, and just people who like to learn about interesting things in sports. And welcome to Experts Corner. I'm Mike Provenzale, and our expert is Mr. Joe Orlando. Joe, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me again, Mike.
Yeah, of course. Peek behind the curtain. We just had a 90-minute Zoom meeting. So, although it may appear we're just greeting each other, we're going on 2 hours of talking online, but glad to bring all of you in. And today's topic is tickets, which has always been a part of the hobby and the industry and been a part of sports since it began. But ticket collecting has really exploded in the last 2 years. Joe, what do you think about the increase in interest in tickets lately?
Yeah, I would say long overdue. I'm a big fan of tickets. You could, when you get into it and you start learning more about collecting tickets, you can see why it's so interesting. Because in some ways, that they can be collected like cards. They're sort of small and they're graded similar to cards, a little bit different but very similar. You can create great themes. They can be team centric. They can be player centric. They can be event centric, like World Series, Super Bowl, and so forth. But they're also kind of like game used because they're part of the history of the game. They're part. In other words, tickets were not made to be collectibles. They were made so people could get into the events they were attending. So it really has sort of a wide variety of appeal, different aspects of it that can appeal to different kinds of collectors. So they really are fascinating. And then when you add in the fact that they are far tougher when you go back in time, when you talk about vintage cards and vintage tickets, I mean, there's no comparison in most cases when it comes to scarcity. So they offer so many different things, but yeah, you have a fan in tickets in me for sure.
Oh, well, then we picked the right person. And like you said, they're very utilitarian. They were just an object to get in the game, but it's something, not everybody collects cards, not everybody collects memorabilia, but most sports fans go to sporting events or go to concerts, and tickets are something everyone is familiar with. The newest generation may be less familiar than we were as it all lives on their phone, but that's an aspect that could add to the value and interest in these hard copy tickets that there just aren't going to be them going forward for the most part. When was the last time you went to an event and had a ticket in hand for it?
Yeah, it's probably been a couple of years now. Yeah, a couple of most of it's digital as you speak of. So in that respect, they're sort of a snapshot in time, of a time, we'll look, 10, 20 years that, from now and look back and go, oh, you remember the time when, you received a physical ticket? And so it is, yeah, then it sort of leads into nostalgia and all of those things, which we'll get into here. But, another aspect, by the way, I just want to mention about tickets is that they're great complements to existing collections. So there are, as you know, Mike, you've been in this business forever. I mean, there are collectors that are very card centric, or they're very game use centric. They're vintage photo centric. The great thing about tickets is you don't have to go all in on tickets. You don't have to be just a ticket collector. But if you're a collector of the Brooklyn Dodgers or the Green Bay Packers or whatever it is, the Yankees, tickets are a great complementary piece to your existing collection. So they're just great in a number of respects. And again, yeah, we'll look back and it'll be a time long gone at some point.
Yeah, and you can really see the change in eras and what the world was like at the time through tickets, especially when you're looking at baseball, where the history of tickets goes back so far. If you look at tickets from the 80s, they're pretty simple, pretty straightforward, which was just kind of a testament to maybe capitalism of the 80s, that this is what it is. Let's just break it out. But if you look back in the 30s and 40s, they were pieces of art in some cases. And
Right.
even though they could be seen as disposable, but you kind of get a taste of it, or it has an Art Deco design versus the designs in the 70s that were a little groovier or had different vibes, we'll say. So there's a real aesthetic aspect to tickets as well.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, the graphics are a huge part of that eye appeal. And so, as we'll see here, as we go through different tickets, you'll see the wide range in eye appeal. And then as you get, into the 80s and you start talking about the difference between like the season ticket, the tickets that are issued by the teams versus the Ticketmaster tickets, how they look different. the scarcity differences. There's all sorts of sort of rabbit holes you could go down with tickets, but they're definitely. I'm really happy that they're finally getting their due because of how important they really are.
Yeah, and we've seen some huge prices for tickets over the past few years. Six-figure prices, which was almost inconceivable not that long ago, a few years ago. But it's something that you can still find great examples at affordable prices for events, teams, players that are important to you. So let's go through some of the interesting examples you picked out here. And I should note, we have our newsletter that comes out. You should sign up for, and this was the topic of the newsletter this week. Joe wrote a great article about it. So a great resource for people. And what do you want to start with, Joe?
I guess, if you want it, we could almost do a chronological pass if you'd like. So if you want to start with the 1919 World Series, we have a few tickets that actually came from one consigner, and there's an interesting backstory to that. So this was a consigner that I'd worked with directly, and his grandfather worked in politics in the Chicago area. And at the time, this didn't come from a collector. He just
You're right over there, Joe. You're frozen.
Just bought inside in between a couple of pages, and you'll see the colors are so rich, they're vibrant because they were kept out of sight for so long. So this is a great example of a collectible not coming from a collector, but it's something that turned into collectible. It was a keepsake, and is here with us now today, which is a great opportunity for someone looking to pick up a piece or multiple pieces from this really both significant and tragic really event in sports history.
Yeah, one of the most notorious events. And, when it comes to tickets, whenever we get 1919 World Series tickets, it's always a lot of interest. That's something that even people who don't collect tickets or aren't even big baseball fans are certainly aware of.
Yeah, I mean, and what's interesting, you can see here with the image of the Game 1 ticket there. One thing that you'll see on both, we have a Game 1, a Game 2, and a Game 5 ticket. Especially with those Game 1 and Game 2 tickets, they're only, I'm putting them in quotes, only graded a 2 and a 3. But I think you would agree, Mike, and I think the viewers would agree, when you look at the images and the eye appeal of these tickets, the eye appeal far exceeds the technical grades. They have typical little paper wrinkles just from handling, that sort of thing. But when you look at them, they're beautiful. I mean, the colors are rich because, again, they were kept out of sight for so long. They weren't handled a lot after the fact. They were just kept by someone who was actually at the event, which is, to me, it's, again, part of the cool nature of tickets is just the thought, what this ticket represents, that this person who was passed down, this person was at this event and actually at 3 of the games from the series.
Yeah, and we see that a lot, that when these tickets come in, and we've had a lot of people grading tickets and seeing reports that they're valuable and going through their collections, and it's things that people went to a memorable game and they kept it or put it in their drawer, and then their family held on to it as well. And great example here from the 1919 World Series.
By the way, by chance, do you have the Game 5?
I do.
You could pull up. I wanted to show, this is just one of those little nuances about vintage tickets as it relates to the World Series that can be confusing to someone. It certainly was confusing to me when I first learned about it, but I wanted to point it out if we have a shot of that, the front of that ticket. So back in those days, many of us forget that the World Series was actually 8 games. It wasn't 7 games. And in addition to that, the way they would sort of notate or on the ticket, the way they would label them on the Game 5 ticket, if you can pull that up, you'll see it'll actually have a 3. Yeah, there it is right there. Again, I think I just saw it, but there's actually a 3 on the front of the ticket. So people are saying, oh, that must be Game 3. The way they labeled them at that time is there would be the home team, then they would travel to the other field, the other team, and they would actually start again. So the 3 that you see on that ticket right there, it actually represents game 5. So it's actually the 5th game of the series. It's the 3rd game at that stadium. So just one of those, again, lots of nuance when it comes to, tickets and other collectibles, but it's something that I know in the past was confusing for me. But when I learned about it, it's like, oh, okay, that's what they mean. It's the 3rd game, 5th game in the series, but the 3rd game at the 2nd location. So in any event, just to pass that along.
And as we were discussing earlier, sometimes the population report for tickets can be incredibly complicated, especially when you get into the different variations and things like that.
That's right. I mean, one of the areas of tickets where there's a tremendous amount of variations are Super Bowl tickets. You get into different color variations, and some of them are much more scarce than others. And that's for someone, if you want to call it, there's the basic set, and then there's the master set. And if you want to get real deep, it's like someone collecting T206s and wanting to get all the factory and series combinations, the back variations on the advertising. So people do that in tickets as well. If they really, if Super Bowl is what they love, some of them decide to go a step further than just getting one example. They want to get every variation of that particular, year.
Yeah, and here's a Super Bowl I ticket, which is one that we see a lot of different variations of. And a common question, what's the different variations? Just because when people who are used to going to games, they don't ever think, what variation ticket am I getting to this event? But it's something that gets added on later.
That's true. And this one, in this particular ticket, what is so neat about this is, again, we were talking about the Super Bowl. I think firsts of things are, really important. You see that in almost every other thing, rookie cards, type 1, photos, game used. I mean, first. So the first Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl, as I wrote about in the newsletter that was released yesterday, I mean, it's the single biggest event kind of in our culture. And it goes beyond, it transcends sports really. And so to have a ticket from the very first one, which has now become such a part of the fabric of our culture, is really important. So I love this ticket. It's a terrific piece, and the Super Bowl. It's one of those things where you could actually collect a really cool run, even if you're not going for all the variations of these great events. It's one game, which I love. Is very different from most other sports, right? It's one game for all the marbles. That's right. It. So something very special about that as well. But to have a ticket from the first one ever is just tremendous.
And doesn't even say Super Bowl on it. Interesting, just the World Championship game. And one that was not well attended either. So a lot
Right.
lot facts.
Or competitive.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, or competitive. You and I weren't there, but I certainly wasn't alive. But wasn't a very competitive game either. The Green Bay Packers destroyed the opposition. So as they, that was their period for sure. But just a really neat piece there for anyone who's interested in tickets or otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so where are we going now?
You tell me. You pull it up. We'll go. You want to go? Let's see.
Why don't we do this 32 World Series Game 3? Aesthetically, this is one of my favorites. Right there. So yeah, Babe Ruth's called shot. One of the most famous moments in baseball history. But like we were talking about earlier, this is like a piece of vintage art here.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, the colors are so vibrant. You got that gigantic 3 right in the heart of the design. I love this ticket. It's funny. I remember years ago when I first saw, and many of our viewers may have seen the same footage that I'm sure you've seen as well, Mike. There's that grainy footage of like Ruth at the plate, and he's, you could see that he's going at it with the dugout, with the Cubs dugout.
Right.
And it's not quite clear if he pointed or not. But to me, I wanted to make this point today. To me, it doesn't matter if he physically pointed or not. If you think about the moment in the game. It's the World Series, and they are, I mean, you can clearly see like they're just going at it. I mean, he's at the plate, the pitches are coming in, and he's going at it with the dugout. And he answered it, whether he pointed or not, he pointed, if you know what I mean. He answered it with the home run after they went back and forth, you know, ragging each other, and he did it around the bases as well. I mean, to me, it's just such a cool moment. And of course, you know, in sports lore and hobby lore, he pointed anyway. You know, again, we don't have great footage of it, but we do have clear footage of what was happening at the time in terms of between Ruth and the opposing dugout, and the fact that he answered the call in that way, just that's what Ruth is. I mean, on the biggest stage, in the biggest moments, he came through.
And like you said, I mean, imagine if that happened in the World Series now, that the guy at bat, if it was the biggest star, was jawing with the opposing team, the pitcher, and then hits a home run. You know, that would be the biggest sporting moment of the past decade, if not ever.
Right. And of course, in our society today, the umpire would tell him to stop saying mean things. You know, it's a different world. It's a different world today than probably 1932. But they would cut it off so quickly. So I'm not even sure this could happen today, if you know what I mean. The umpires would probably rein it in, you know, with the players. But it's such a cool moment. And as you pointed out, Mike, such a great looking ticket. And why do we collect a lot of the stuff we collect? It's the visual aspect of it, and it really is a gorgeous ticket.
And this is one I would see a lot back in the day, reproductions of it when people had, you know, a Ruth signed item in a display with a frame. This was a ticket that they would have a reproduction or a photo of this ticket to denote it. So, you know, a lot of people were familiar with it even before ticket collecting really started to get traction in the hobby.
Well, yeah, this is what makes Babe Ruth more Paul Bunyan than a real,
sure.
you know, human being, and it's just, there's a symbolic value to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's one of my favorites for sure. We've been blessed at Heritage to see a few of those. Let's see what else we've got. We've got some great baseball tickets for sure. Why don't we move on to this 55 World Series Game 7 while we're talking World Series?
Yeah, so, I mean, for Dodgers fans, especially Brooklyn Dodger fans at the time, I mean, the Yankees, that was when they seemingly won the World Series. It seemed like every year for so long, and they had such a great team with Berra and Mantle and Whitey Ford, and this was the year that Brooklyn finally brought it home. And so it has such a special meaning. And this, you know, Mike, you and I were talking about this the other day. I mean, another aspect of ticket collecting that's so great, it's nostalgia. And so for someone who loves the Dodgers, loves Dodger history, or as a family that you know, was a big, you know, Brooklyn Dodger fans at the time, it's part of their sort of family culture. I mean, it's such a key moment in history, and again, from a nostalgia point of view. So, you know, this was again, what a great team the Dodgers had. I mean, you know, Reese and Jackie Robinson and Koufax just, you know, entered the league and just made his debut. He didn't really have much of an impact his first year, but he technically was on that team too. But Gil Hodges and the bunch, I mean, they were a very talented team, but they just couldn't get over the hump. And then in 1955 they did, and it meant so much to that group and the fans. So it really has a special,
fitting for them to get over the hump in a Game 7 too. You know, it couldn't have been a 4 or 5 game series. They'd had to go to the wire in every way.
They had to kick and scratch, you know, the whole, like to your point, all the way through and get it done. And so and you know, just like the 32 ticket, I mean, look at how the colors, it's so beautiful. You see obviously the Yankee logos there, but
2 Yankee logos, which I love about it. Yeah. One of the greatest dynasties ever. And they still had the overproduction, over promotion on this one. One of my favorite parts of it.
Yeah, no, just a terrific ticket all the way around, and a really special. Again, this goes into nostalgia, I'm sure, for people. So a really special moment in history.
Yeah, my dad's family is from Brooklyn, and his dad was always a Dodger fan, but my dad became a Yankee fan because the Dodgers left, and it was a
Yeah.
point of contention, I'd say. I'd say.
Yeah, and that's a whole other thing. Talking about tickets where teams move to new cities, that's a whole other thing. But
Yeah, some great World Series tickets. Here's a 1960 World Series ticket as well. Very
yeah,
important World Series, and I just love that old Bucks logo, which we've got on here as well.
yeah. I mean, again, we're Yankees again, right? So it's always somebody against the Yankees during that event. And of course, Game 7. But what's so cool about this is the World Series, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, a little bit later. What's so neat about a game like that, and this is true of Super Bowl or an NBA championship game today. Sometimes it's not the big star that you expect to deliver in the big moment. Sometimes it's someone else, and in this case, Bill Mazeroski, who's Hall of Famer, tremendous defensive player, but wasn't a big bat. That wasn't his thing. And to hit a true walk-off series home run is just it was the first time it happened, and still to this day the only time it's happened in that way. And so
Right.
the way it ended, and you've seen, I'm sure, again, the viewers have seen the great images from the moment where he's rounding third and people are coming out of the stands. I mean, it's a wild scene. But to end it, they kicked and scratched, much like the Brooklyn Dodgers did several years earlier against the powerhouse Yankees. And here comes Bill Mazeroski, not known for his bat, and he hits the walk-off, home run to win the whole thing. Again, this is what little kids dream about doing. So that's another part of it too, is that so many magical moments that kind of give you the chills if you're a real sports fan and get into this stuff. But kids dream about doing this.
And to do it against the Yankees, of course, in that era. If they had done it against the Red Sox fans would have just said, of course. But how many people who weren't Pirates fans were rooting for them in that moment just because they were playing the Yankees, which happens to the Yankees still to this day. But yeah, the thing that really put Mazeroski, a Hall of Famer, in everyone's minds for coming up so big at that one moment. And this is another, we see a lot of photos of that. Mazeroski signed photos, pretty common in the hobby. But this is something that distills that moment down even further because it was there in the situation.
Exactly. Again, another facet of ticket collecting. Yeah, it's not just a commemorative collectible produced after the fact. It's a part of that moment in time. You needed this ticket to get into that game. And so, when you think about that, just how cool is it, to imagine what it was like to be there and witness history.
And then, of course, we have to do 77 World Series Game 6 here. The Reggie Jackson 3 homers in the clincher. We've ragged on the Yankees a little bit, so we'll give them their props here.
Yeah, I mean, 1977, and this is where love them or hate them, right? For those who grew up like myself and you, Mike. I mean, Reggie was, he was something else. I mean, again, people would cheer him, people would boo him, but he really was Mr. October. And this is his moment. I mean, of all the moments he had in his career, he had 500 home runs. He was an MVP. He had other titles. He won with the A's previously. This is the game. If you had to, pin it to one game of what defines Reggie's career, what was the sort of crowning achievement, this is it. He had 3 home runs on 3 consecutive pitches. And the last one was a 450-foot plus Titanic bomb to center field into that hitting background at old Yankee Stadium. This is what made him, Mr. October. And after 1975 and 76, where the Reds won back-to-back, and in 1976, the Reds just rolled over the Yankees. What do? They bring in Reggie. And again, it's about delivering in these moments. They bring Reggie in, and what do? They win the World Series in his first full season with the Yankees in 1977. And then they go back to back in 77 and 78. So again, you can't, there are all of these great stars have so many great moments during their careers, but for Reggie, this was it. This was the moment that, if you had to have, define his career, it was just such an amazing performance, an amazing game from a player that, heard a lot of boos on the road. But as Reggie said, and it's one of my favorite quotes, fans don't boo nobodies. And he's absolutely right. So just
Derek Grady uses that quote about himself a lot when he's at shows. So I've heard that a lot. But as we mentioned earlier, the pop report can come into tickets as well, which is, it straddles the line between memorabilia and cards. It's got a pop report. This one, a near mint 7, the pop 4 with only 5 superior. So that gives a little extra layer to collectors who love that bit of competition and comparison. So yeah, you can get the pop report involved in these as well. And like we said, amazing moment. We're very lucky at Heritage. We get to talk about 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure items as well. But, here's a great item for Yankees fans, estimate $1,500.
Right. No, it's such a great point, Mike. I mean, that's another thing that tickets offer. Yes, there are tickets that sell, as you mentioned earlier, for 6 figures and beyond, something like a Jackie Robinson debut ticket. That's an example. But there are also many great tickets that are, hundreds of dollars to low thousands. So there's something for, everybody in that range of budget. And there's some, like you said, amazing moments that can be acquired for a fraction of some of those real big tickets, no pun intended.
And, things that when you get more into that modern era, you could say you could have been at this game. You could have a family member who was at this game. So it can have that personal touch to it as well.
Or just remember watching it on TV, like just that, even if you're not physically there, just remembering the moment and how it impacted you when you saw it. And again, there's some other tickets here that we'll get into, because now you're getting into, my childhood, your childhood, 70s and 80s, and some interesting moments. But even if you weren't able to attend, just watching it on TV. Oh boy.
Speaking of which,
we had to do this one.
So this is the 88 World Series Game 1. What can you tell us about your vantage point on that game?
Oh boy, this is a fun one. So this is nostalgia in both a good way and a bad way, but I am so glad I was there. So my little brother and I attended this game. We had seats down close by the right field foul pole, not in the bleachers where the homer landed, but by the right field foul pole. And of course, we were all decked out in our A's gear in enemy territory. And we thought that we had the game in hand. Here comes Eck out of the pen. He was unhittable. There's no way. And then, of course, here comes Kirk Gibson, hobbling out of the dugout. He looks like Charles Barkley trying to hit a golf ball. Like it was like the swing was so awkward. And because he was in so much pain, both of his legs were in tremendous pain from injuries he had suffered that year. And you're just thinking, there is no possible way this can happen. And of course, the rest is history. He hit that ball. And I told Mike this, sort of off camera, but I swear when I was there, 2 things about that home run that were so amazing. Number one, that ball floated out of the stadium. I mean, floated over the fence. It probably had the lowest exit velocity of any home run I have ever seen in baseball. It was almost like it was willing itself over the fence. It was so slow to develop, just a very lazy high fly ball, and it just kept carrying, and it just landed in those right field bleachers. But I will tell you, when it did, it was the most deafening sound I have ever experienced at a sporting event, and I'm a fan of so many different sports. It was, and I was so glad, even though my team that day, the team I was rooting for, didn't win, to be there and experience that was just, and I still think you could argue this is the coolest moment in all of sports, period. Forget about baseball.
Yes.
But just to be there was amazing. Now, I will say this, because I love laughing at myself. When I got home that night, some of my friends decided to TP my house with blue and white toilet. So that's a side note to all this. So there's a painful part of the nostalgia here, but such an incredible moment. And I think, as you pointed out earlier, a much more affordable ticket in the scheme of things as we talk through some of these great moments. And this one, again, happens to be autographed as well.
Yeah, another great aspect to tickets there is you can, and a lot of guys from this era are doing shows, so you can get these tickets signed from their moments, and something you're going to bring up to them that they might have a comment or two about. If you got Gibson to sign this, he might say something about it, and that's, like we talked about, one of those moments that everyone knows where they were when it happened, when they were watching it. So it's a real conversation starter amongst anyone, even people who aren't huge baseball fans remember that moment. It was the biggest sporting moment of the year, no question. And yeah, as we said, this one is PSA authentic, so $1,000. This is something any Dodgers fan can add to their collection. And I'm a big fan of the signed tickets as well. Nice added touch there. But we have more than just baseball tickets. That, of course, dominates the scene, as it does with anything in the hobby. But we have some amazing basketball tickets as well. And let's do this one right here, the 79 NCAA Finals ticket. Talking about really important finals. This, in a lot of ways, you could say this finals here saved college basketball and pro basketball.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let me begin by saying, because as soon as you pull it up, of course, your eyes go right to the visual appeal of this ticket. Yes. I love the colors. The ticket, I mean, the blue and yellow and red colors on this ticket are just tremendous. And again, if you, just like we were talking about with those early 1919 Game 1 and Game 2 World Series tickets, look, the grade, it is only, again in quotes, only graded a 4. Okay. But look at the ticket at arm's length. It's gorgeous. It's a beautiful ticket. At arm's length, it looks closer to near mint than it does a 4. It has tickets, as most do. It has technical issues that bring the grade down on the surface and so forth. But going back to your comment, Mike, I mean, we have a few tickets that kind of fall into this category. It's like, it's a glimpse of what's to come next. And you can't make this up, right? Magic versus Bird, and Magic got the better of them in this game to bring home the title. But they would go on to perhaps have, arguably one of, certainly one of, but maybe the best rivalry with the Lakers and Celtics over the next, decade plus. And as someone who grew up, during that period, I mean, I know we all have our opinions. We all lean towards different periods, but it was so fun to be a basketball fan. Yes. And a lot of it has to do with Magic and Bird and just that fire they brought to the game and their well-rounded skills, their leadership, and the rivalry between the Celtics and Lakers and then other players that came in later, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But I love the fact that this ticket symbolizes, those two guys before they would go to that next stage, the bigger stage, and face off two Hall of Famers, facing off for the next, decade plus. So it's just a terrific ticket all the way around.
And how rare is it in the NCAA tournament for a great player that you knew was going to be a top draft pick and an NBA player, but played at a small school to make it to the finals? Michigan State was a powerhouse. They had the other greatest players. But, very surprising for Indiana State to make it. And what I love about this ticket is the iconic University of Utah arena on here. You think anyone could draw that or picture it in their mind? But it ends up having an iconic moment in the hobby because now people know this ticket. They recognize this ticket, and it's always going to be a part of it right there. And we also have a Magic and Bird signed example of this ticket in the auction, which is very cool as well. Another great signed example. And as you said, ticket debuts, always very important. And here's a great collegiate debut from 1981 from the UNC Tar Heels, of course, Michael Jordan's debut for the Tar Heels. And rare ticket here. What I love about this one is it's Tar Heels versus the Jayhawks, two of the most blue blood programs. And that's where Jordan made his collegiate debut. And, you know, a rare ticket because, yeah, I bet it was a fun game to go to, but who's holding on to a ticket like this afterwards? A season beginning ticket.
That's right. I mean, you're hitting on a really important point, and this goes across all sports. There are some players that come into the league or at the time, as you mentioned, where you know this is going to be very special. It's a special debut of a particular player. But in most cases, we don't know. The story hasn't been written yet. And that's why debut tickets are so special and in a lot of cases so valuable, because so few people bothered to hold on to them. And you know, with Jordan, in this particular auction, we have quite the selection of Jordan tickets. I mean, it's really, really interesting. If you're a Jordan fan, there's a little something for everyone in there. But to have this ticket, and then of course a little bit, you know, probably a few lots later, we have the signed NCAA title ticket, which again was just a glimpse of what Jordan would become. But this ticket, again, you brought up the best point, is that how many people thought about keeping it? What was the reason to keep this particular ticket? The fact that somebody did, what does that do? It delivers a really great collectible for the rest of us today.
Right. And here is the NCAA finals for Jordan when he hit the shot before the more famous shot against the Cavs. But one everyone recognizes, you know, another blue bloods versus blue blood finals here. And what I love about this one, it's signed by Jordan. Great addition, you know, and then Jordan's signature always valuable, but it has become off the charts in the last few years as far as value. And so a really unique item to have his signature on here.
100%. I mean, you saw it on I think it was the Kirk Gibson ticket. You mentioned that we have the Magic Bird ticket. You brought the point up. I mean, just like signed cards have become a really, really popular collectible over the past several years and really escalated in value. I mean, signed tickets, especially in the case of someone like Jordan, which, let's face it, it's hard to acquire his autograph at this point. He did have a deal with Upper Deck Authenticated for many, many years, producing sort of limited edition products and that sort of thing. But Jordan isn't exactly an easy autograph to obtain. So even if you have the ticket, it's hard to get it signed. So to have both, and again, I love the idea that this is just a glimpse of what was to come later. And of course, he hit the winning shot to beat Georgetown, right? Like you can't. It's right out of Hollywood, the scripting. I mean, that he hits the game-winning shot in this game. And then, of course, goes on, as you mentioned, to hit other many famous shots. But I mean, to become arguably the greatest player who ever lived. So,
and you can hear it in the broadcast how shocked they are that the freshman is taking the game-winning shot on such a loaded team, really. So, yeah, a great precursor to what he was going to become. And you've got the PSA 10 autograph from Jordan on there. Just a really stunning piece, and I'm excited to see where this one's going to end up next week when it closes.
Autograph. So, you know, the autograph that you just pointed out. I mean, there are signatures, and then there are signatures. The fact that he placed it so nicely on there that's also a big part of that. Again, it goes back to eye appeal. We'll say that repeatedly. Autograph placement on a ticket is very important, just like it's very important on a card or a photograph or a ball. So he placed it so nicely. It's such a great autograph and presents so well. So it has a great display quality to it.
Yeah, and while we're mentioning that, we got to talk about this Jordan one here, signed as well. This is from his 84 NBA debut, which, as far as tickets, there's tiers to debuts. You've got the collegiate debut. Some people like, oh, this is the championship game debut. Then we've seen some very interesting prices for Jordan's professional debut, which was in the preseason in Peoria against the Pacers. But this is his Washington Bullets' first official NBA game, season debut in the '84 season against the Bullets, and it's got an autograph as well, PSA 9 autograph from MJ.
Yeah, this is, it's one of those things. It's sort of, let's be clear about it. Like, in the ticket world, this is the equivalent of a rookie card. Like, this is what all of those other tickets are super important and interesting, but of all the types of tickets that someone can collect, they're sort of, NBA major league debut, their big time debut in a game that counts. That's the ticket that people consider the rookie card of tickets. And again, this one happens to be autographed. So what again, Michael Jordan, look, it wasn't like he wasn't drafted. I think he was drafted 3rd that year. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So he came in with some hype, but not as much hype as people like, now we're going through the LeBron, sort of era. LeBron came in my view, with much more hype than Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan came in with some hype, and people thought he could be very good, but not to the level of a guy like LeBron. And so, again, somebody had to make the decision to keep this ticket. And, it is Michael Jordan, and I'm certainly it makes more sense to keep this ticket than the collegiate debut.
Right.
But it's not like there are tons and tons of them out there available, and certainly not ones that are signed. So the fact that you have a signature on the ticket, and this is really, again, the rookie card of the ticket world, just a tremendously important ticket, and it's off to a very good start. I think I just saw the
34,000 there. Really great example. Nice vintage signature from Jordan too. That's another factor that weighs into it. Like we said, you're probably going to have Jordan get in debt to you on the golf course to get an autograph out of him these days. That's just not going to happen. So to have the vintage autograph, probably signed, maybe at the game or shortly after. So a really great example. I also like on the back here, the Chicago Sting getting some publicity. The old Chicago and ASL soccer team here is going to have a little bit of notoriety forever by being on the back of this ticket with the Bulls and the Blackhawks for Chicago Stadium. But yeah, very interesting to see where Jordan's stuff's going to go. And this is a super rare item here that's going to close next week. And what else did we have? Oh, yes. We've got one more Super Bowl ticket to talk about. So let me pull that one up. We talked about the Super Bowl I ticket, and then we've got this example here from the 2002 Super Bowl 36, which is the Tom Brady Super Bowl, and that one's got a Brady autograph on it as well. The thing about Super Bowl tickets, which we've seen a lot, as you can, like we talked about earlier, really see how they transformed over the years and just became more and more gaudy and impressive. And this one here, they've got the American flag in the shape of the U.S. presentation. But yeah, still calling it the AFC NFC World Championship game here. But the important part about this ticket is Brady, of course.
Yeah, and of course the comment you made about the kind of the evolution of the Super Bowl ticket, it seemingly followed the gaudiness and impressive nature of Super Bowl rings. They kind of went along the path, but they got sort of more and more ornate. But in any event, yeah, I mean, look, this is we talked about different kinds of firsts before. Look, when it comes to Tom Brady, because of the 7 Super Bowl championships, this is number one, and that is going to go down in history as such an important part of not only his legacy, but just the legacy of just the sport itself. Because of what I don't think I think it's safe to say, Mike, you and I have talked about this before. I don't think we'll ever see a career quite like Tom Brady's ever again. It doesn't mean that some players won't eclipse him in certain areas, certain statistical categories, but to go to 10 Super Bowls and to win 7 of them, I just can't imagine it happening. So even Mahomes is off to such a great start.
but it seems inconceivable that he could do that,
Right.
and he would be the closest favorite right now. But I mean, he's just got the two already. So he's behind the eight ball, you could say, if he wants to catch Brady.
Yeah, that's right. And so again, and one thing again, I don't want to sort of as they say, kind of belabor the point, but the fact that it's signed, I mean, something that and I'm sure we'll talk about this. This will be a recurring theme on these videos that we put together. But with modern, current athletes, contemporary athletes, it has changed so much because of compensation that they have very little incentive to do signings anymore. It's hard to forget about Tom Brady and Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
It's hard to get the backup second baseman, for the Rays to sign because it's changed. And it's something that I think as collectors, we need to understand. There was a time in, the 80s and the 90s where so many of these great players, current stars, Hall of Famers from the past, they made livings signing autographs after the fact. But the money is it's not just a little bit bigger. It's so much bigger now. And a lot of these athletes are involved in different business ventures outside of the sport, that signing autographs at the local baseball card show or signing autographs, private signings, they happen once in a while. It's not that they don't, but they're so infrequent compared to the past. So if you're able to acquire an item that is already autographed and certified, to me, that there's a value in that that I think will sort of prove out over time. I mean, to secure it now instead of thinking, well, I'll just get that some other time. It's changed. I mean, these athletes, like I said, it's not just today, but over the past couple of decades, the money is so much greater that the stars of right now, I don't know if they'll ever have the incentive to sign. Again, I'm not saying they wouldn't sign in a friendly manner. You catch them, outside of a restaurant or before a game. But I mean, in terms of making, doing private signings, producing quantity, it's going to be more and more difficult to acquire signed items from these players. They just don't have the incentive to do it. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind as you're building your collection. If you can acquire something that is previously signed, I think it's a great idea and it's worth a premium to secure it.
I agree. And, even catching them out in the wild, you could say the cat's out of the bag on the hobby. And a lot of these guys know this may just be sold down the road. And a lot of athletes just won't sign in that situation, not because they are being mean, but they just know the deal and the industry. And that's kind of part of that is past for a lot of athletes as well.
Right. Or at best, they'll sign it, but they'll give you the squiggle, the squiggle signature on the back in the wrong spot. But if you get it, we saw it on the Jordans, we see it on the Brady. Just a nice, and this is the way he signs. Just a nice, short, clean signature in the center of the ticket. It's nice to be able to put sort of the bird in the hand as a collector versus taking your chances later on.
Absolutely. Well, a great conversation as always, Joe. And a really interesting aspect of the hobby that a lot of people are getting into, that I'm enjoying, that it's become a topic of conversation in the industry, as I know you have. And I'm looking forward to these weekly conversations. We're going to do these every Tuesday when we're available on Tuesdays. But keep an eye out. And Joe, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Real easy email to remember, joe@ha.com.
Doesn't get easier than that. I'm Mike Provenzale. You can reach me by messaging us on any of the Heritage Sports social media platforms. Everybody have a great afternoon and enjoy the NBA and NHL playoffs tonight, and we'll see you next week.
See you, Mike.